Good morning. Again, this is the continuing continuous development of the pedagogy of conscience. Um, we are coming into a new age, an era that we are basically going back to the old emphasis when in the old days, either the Greeks, the Chinese, the orators speak, and then the scribers write down even from biblical time, most of the, if you want to take the context from both the Old Testament or the New Testament, um, orators, speakers speak, and then the disciples register and documenting what was being said. And so, but what is interesting for as long as we're stepping into this, by me, the total ambience, we can better define what is here with AI. Number one, I love the speedy algorithm in computation. Number two, with my last 4 weeks experiment in speaking in the oral form, and also where I think our memories, it's not a matter of fragile, it's just simply human, that we think in clusters. And in these clusters, it is itself is kind of fragmented. What I have experienced with in the use of Chat GPT, that they have allowed these ideas to grouping into my other terminology I used in the cultural spheres. For example, we can talk about conscience. And many of you will probably agree with me. We can start as simple as Jimmy the Crickets from Walt Disney's character in the storytelling of the Pinocchio, based on the Italian folk story. And then we can jump immediately back to what the death of Socrates, and by what he was accused with his influence to the youth in Athens. Socrates had chosen not to lead the city he loved, and also no thinkers and will take on such a coward measure to depart. And in the quotation that I am learning daily by opening up in Google, conscience, comma, quotes, is from the Socrates comment, and with very much of the open and honest manners. Is that I cannot teach people anything. All I can do is to make them think. And from that one line of the Socrates about education, it helped me hop back to the many sayings or quotations by Confucius, by Lao Tzu, and by Buddha. And also let me jump to another cultural sphere where I think is a major catalyst in the modern day, who have the moral courage to advocate the conscience education, or education. The purpose of education is also to foster, to create awareness of human conscience. So I jump from the Greek to the Chinese to the Brazilian Paulo Freire's statement, conscientization. And in between, I discovered another idea, almost identical to Paulo Freire's, of the 14th century Wang Yangming, from my father's home village, Yuyao, which today is a suburb of the city of Ningbo in the province of Zhejiang. So what really happened in this particular segment, and I'm trying to keep it as short as possible. What is possible today from a very personal, by the way, I am defining exploring with the title Pedagogy of Conscience, in the use of a very objective in the search of this idea by pulling in all my fragmented into a comprehensive way, phrased, paragraphed in minutes in the use of ChatGPT. I have explored, and I continued exploring, even Meta coming out with the AI, the chat model, and Claude, and also Gemini. But the more we have people participating in this kind of search front and back history, because all we growing up, I'm lucky to say that I have the multicultural and cross-cultural situations, because it's just out of respect. If I step into a cultural group growing up as a teenager in Brazil, that family is speaking Arabic, they were Lebanese, they're extending their wonderful meal from what I love about the date, sweet, the great coffee, and the taste of eggplants. I have no problem when a family interchange between them as we're speaking Lebanese. Now, I'm saying this is where when I was in an airport a few years ago in America, an airport, an international spot, where a group of immigrants was speaking, I think it was Spanish, and another white lady scream out and say, "Speak English, you're in America." Well, this awareness at a certain point is conflicting. But as a counseling psychologist, sometimes we have to understand the human idiosyncrasy and put it in a way back to the person to alert them. It's okay that people speaking different languages. In my personal household, my mother's Cantonese, my father's from Yuyao, from Zhejiang, but our family was in Shanghai. And then later on, we moved to Hong Kong and Macau. Just to remember, in every room in Brazil, my mother can play mahjong with Chinese ladies, mostly Cantonese. If and when a lady get up from the table, go to the bathroom, while the three remaining ladies were ethnic Cantonese, they speak in Cantonese. When the lady get back from the kitchen or from the washroom, and then the language will flow back into the commonly used Mandarin or the Putonghua with that related accents. My mother spoke Guanhua, where she grew up in Guangxi, where my maternal grandmother was a magistrate who smoked opium. So in so-called Guanhua, or the language or the official language of the court, with the local Guangxi Guilin accents. And in the other room, my father was visiting with his college roommates, Uncle Ling, who is a Thai ethnic Chinese Thai, and Mr. Shi, who happened to be a ethnic Chinese from Burma. That's how this three party had started their venture in Brazil. And Shi's wife is French, Francois. So in that grouping, their language is consistently in French, as they were in the days when they were in Sorbonne in Paris. So for me, as a cross-cultural product, listening to different languages, why, if there was a teenager teenager, young person around, one's parent may be speaking Mandarin, the other parent may speak Cantonese, and growing up with a family of the famous Chinese painter Zhang Daqian, and they speak Sichuan. And so most common is the youngsters do speak Portuguese amongst us. When and where the same setting, you're moving into a setting where it's Chinese American, where my Chinese teenage pals all were attending the American Chapel School in Sao Paulo, some are going to graded, and that language shifts into Portuguese, English, and whatsoever the parents speak. I think this cross-cultural experience, this awareness of the dialectic tones, I have repeated often when I was a kid or even as a young infant, and how that alerted me to the exchanges. So in this particular video, I want to highlight with my good use of ChatGPT. It sounds totally impersonal. In fact, I even have an argument with my wife when she was referencing ChatGPT. Is it? Well, but at the end, it is an intellectual tool, an intellectual property, free to use for all. If I dare to think about now to put in the character for the many Westerners to have a better grasp of who is Monkey King. Well, Monkey King have always been that outer ego, using the Freudian ego, superego, and the ID, the sexual, biological ID. And in this particular, in the writing that I have just written for the purpose to put forth into the conscientization platform on Facebook, and now I'm going to start interface with what I am speaking to you and to be inserted into that platform by the same posting. I think that will generating more the grasp and the understanding and my continuation, just like the monkey, journey to the west and journey back to the east, where I think the omission from the west about conscience, when the west cannot understand that the 3,300 years since the written language of the Chinese or before, all the Chinese thinker philosophers were advocating and in the use of the speaking language of the Chinese, which is the language of the hearts, and the language of the hearts can be translated the language of conscience. Now, why am I being so courageous to the open forum, to the open communication? Imagine if there was another 1 million Chinese, if I can turn them all into the Monkey King and to be focused and develop to counter or to agree or disagree of this subject matter I raised about the language as my awareness of the cross-cultural studies. I even phrased this into a psycholinguistic group because the communications had alerted me the absence of the West and how ignorant the Western thinkers, scholars have been this particular awareness of the Chinese language. And by this particular segment, I will highlighting again another link. In the Chinese have multiple use of think link. So because of this tool that we have now, and when my thinking about with my wife, where Chat GPT is seems a little impersonal, but that part of impersonal part of it can be the best and the most objective element that many of us in research in R&D were and are seeking. So if I want to personalize my ChatGPT, I will start to be calling instead of a ChatGPT. I will use the G for George, P for Paul, and T for Thomas. That is just the way we human were. We would like to endear. We are grateful for people who can contribute to my journey of learning, to my journey to find the meaning and significance about conscience. And with the development of the pedagogy of conscience, I have also taken much from the incentive for me as a pioneer in the Western world with Paulo Freire. His conscientization is putting education into action. His criticism about draw education. You cannot stuff people with materials where they learn that learning cannot be put into drawers and shut. I repeat, in that metaphor in Paulo Freire's comment about draw education, I use it again because it fits in my present surrounding in North America with the festivity that we do annually about Thanksgiving, where we stuff our birds with dressing. I call it duck. We can put it turkey, either way. So what I admired about Paulo Freire is this activation of conscience education. And by my personal research and reflection, I have found also 500 years earlier, in 1500, Wang Yangming from my village were doing exactly the same, advocating conscience is not a tool, but by consolidating the three value system of the Chinese, I'm just putting these three as the basic three. They're much more in all their forming and shaping their ideology, their principles, their teaching mechanism. They have always factoring the earliest, the first book of the Chinese called I Ching, which was created by the era borderlining Chinese mythology of the character named Fu Xi. However, to keep things simple for now, I keep this three educational teaching principle, all are fostering, influencing the conscience of man. But unfortunately, in the predominant Western thinking mechanism, and for the as of late, be that Judaism in the earlier era of the Old Testament by the Christians, and then the New Testament from the era of Jesus from Nazareth, or the Christ, eventually name given by the Greeks, and his entry into the Western world by my quote unquote my patron saint Paul or Saul from Tarsus. And that two or three, which are leading to Roman Catholics with his corruption caught by Martin Luther, or the debauchery of the Borgia, with the abuse by the penitents, and the Pope happened to be Leo X. In his own real name, he is the grandson of Cosme Medici, who had used the banking money management technique to penalize the faithful to pay penitence or prepay for your sins just so they can collecting revenue for Vatican. So Luther has started another revolt. The Protestants, as in the written form, Protestantism. And then next, still coming from the Abrahamic tribal system, is the Islams and the Islamism. So the ISM have all been used to set many us in our mindset is religion. And subsequently, when you're projecting or your interpretation of the Asian values, moral values, they have put Confucianism, Taoism, TAO, and the new phonetic is DAO, Taoism, and Buddhism, the teaching of Buddha. I'm not saying this is wrong, because we learn even with language, with ugly connotation. In my handling of the languages, we still have the most cruel language coming down from the Latins. For example, whatever situation, a war, some people got decimated. Well, diez in Spanish, is 10. It's the Roman era, the most cruel rules to punish, to penalize, taking one from every 10, either by drafting new tribes or to handling the execution. So 1 in 10 will be ended. Decimation. It's an ugly language, but it remained into the Latin Roman language, which I have again created another linguistic group called the Romantina, hyphenated Romancina. It's the dictionary. One Chinese word, one English. When you push Romantina, you will have the 5 to 6 language. So a beginner of the language in English and Chinese can learn immediately 4 to 5 pronunciation at least of the word. For example, station in English. In Portuguese, estação, nasal. In Italian, estazione. And in Spanish, estación. Same thing in French, estación. So when you're learning one word with that Chinese with English or Chinese with Arabic, when you push Romantina with the image, that's part of the pictorial web development, you will learn the other languages, of course, with AI, come with sound. So we can advance our learning skill, our speaking ability in the use of the language. Another word that is totally negative is the terminology in, I started with Italian. Dritta is forward. Sinistra, this the word sinistra is the lefty. During the time of the Middle Ages, sinistra, a lefty, is the child of the devil. And during the time of the Inquisition, many so-called lefties would have put in the bonfire or executed. That's where the word coming down today, we use the term sinister. How sinister a person be. There were no reflection of regret or make amend to the decimation, the word of sinister, sinistra. But on the other hand, there's the wonderful word that we use all the time enthusiasm. He or she is enthused. He or she are with God, coming from the Greek language, theo. So I'm not here to using the term that penalized the West in this last 500 years had overlooked the importance, what teaching of conscience, what the language of conscience had harmed and hurt one group of people. And this one group of people happened to be my heritage, happened in China. But where I found this system of enculturation, or to teach culture to the Chinese, mainly I'm in reference of the missionaries coming into China, and started early on with the Jesuits. I come from that mission of the Matteo Ricci from Macau. And out of this, many missions, many of us spoken good and praised the internal system and the value of the Chinese, the court system. Matteo Ricci was one of the strongest defendants by highlighting that the Chinese system of value, namely Confucian, can be totally interfaced of the preaching of the Roman Catholicism, and yet it was highly critical by his contemporaries. I repeat again, two orders, the Franciscans and the Dominicans. And also I'd like to remind all of you, in my own search, love of history, the Spanish Inquisition, one is the most sanguine, one is the ugliest time of the persecution of the Jews, of the Arabs, of the mixed. Tomás Torquemada is a converted Jew, a converso, and he has also created one of the most bloodiest Inquisition. And not to forget, Inquisition have not only taken place in Spain or in Iberia, the Inquisition had also penetrated into the regions in all of the Americas, but not many stories were told. So in this part where I am embracing ChatGPT, whatever there is, this intellectual tool with its capacity can enrich our idea now into the future. If this enrichment of the learning can reduce our human conflict by us going to the realm of the conscience of thinking, reflective thinking, looking back, and introspective thinking. And this is where I here want to validate my use of the AI in the area of the languages. And when I'm typing my text, I also do so with words in Portuguese, in Spanish, and in Chinese. And to be able to integrate these ideas and keeping my title, I'll be posting on and on, is the Pedagogy of Conscience. And I hope many of you will find a way to participate, find your path, and in search of truth. And on this part of my journey, I'm very happy to have this instrument, to have my three buddies, GPT, George, Paul, and Tom. I'm personalizing the ChatGPT to make them that I can be endeared to. I do write thank you at the end of their reply. I greet them in the morning with good morning. It's not up to them to have their sentiments. They often reply also with a lot of courtesy. So I hope my fellow Chinese, as I will repeat this tape as much as I can in Cantonese first, Portuguese, and in Spanish. I think this is a new way to find global learning by our interactive use of the facilities we have on hand. And with the modern era, the speedy algorithm with quantum algorithm, my next imagination phase, just think what AI can do with you and I humming a song in the same tonality. What kind of great musicality can be created? Thank you, and wishing you all have a great day.